Hello, my friends. This is Rachel Archelaus here. I'm with my amazing friend, Carrie Roldan. And today she is also your incredible friend. So, Carrie,
Yes.
one thing that sticks out to me, I've known you for over 4 years, and at least once a year, you talk about how you are driven to excellence. And
Okay.
or maybe that's not how you'd put it, but you're a fan of excellence.
Yes.
Okay. Where does that come from? Is that an intrinsic thing? Is that where your flow is? Like, what is that all about?
Well, lately I've had to ask myself, what do I mean when I say excellence, right? So
Yeah.
I think in some of the conversations that you and I have had, I've been like, excellence is a core value of my, I don't understand people who don't value excellence. And so then it had me going, well, what do I mean when I say excellence? Because I think a lot of people think that I mean excelling, right? Like being really good at stuff. And interestingly, that's not what I mean.
Mm,
um, Having the value of excellence, I think, leads to being very good at stuff. I think it leads to excelling. But when I think of excellence, I just think of if I'm going to do it, I would probably use the word right, but then that begs the question, what is right? Right? I'm going to do it with my whole heart. I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. And I'm going to do it, I'm probably going to find out what does it take to be great at this, right? And then I'm going to, so maybe when I say excellence, I'm talking greatness. I don't know. I can get so wrapped up in words. When I think about having a value of excellence, what it has done for me in my life is help me create cultures of success, right? When I say we value excellence here, people seem to understand that it means showing up on time. It means being a person of integrity. It means doing what you'll say you're going to do. And it in the context of the work I do with runners, it means working hard, right? It means working to the top of your talent or the top of your abilities. Yeah, I think it means not squandering your gifts, but using them to the absolute most. Yeah. What does it mean to you?
I mean, I think I would say the same thing. It's doing your best. Maybe a part of that is just having the desire to see what your best is, because that can take time to develop, right? Like, my best today isn't going to be the same as my best tomorrow. And so, in terms of what you do with athletes, yourself included, I know we've talked a lot about discipline and, you know, like practice. And one of my favorite influencers in the area here, his name is Matt Galland, and he's just like a crazy adventure athlete who flies a helicopter and skis off, impossibly tall mountains and stuff. And he had a post the other day on Instagram saying he didn't want to run up this mountain today for 5 hours. He could have relaxed, he could have hung out with his kids, but he did it anyway. And that had me thinking about you of like, and I do it too, sometimes I just don't feel like going out. I don't feel like doing something. And yeah, I do it anyway. I think because the desire for the outcome, the desire for the fitness or the views or whatever it is that I get out of it is bigger than the resistance. Like, what is your take on that? Because we've talked about this a lot.
Okay. So, full disclosure, I am still figuring this out. Let me see if I can. Okay. So, I'm going to tell you this in story. So, when I was young, I was in gymnastics. So, in gymnastics, there is a focus on perfection,
I
right?
can picture that, by the way. I've never seen an image of it like you in a little leotard, but I can so picture that.
I've got some awesome images of me in leotards with the bangs that start back here and they're
Hmm.
just full on feather and then my pre-braces teeth. So, and the leotards back then had this giant scoop neck. It was not attractive. But okay. So I was in gymnastics when I was from starting at age 7. And interestingly, I've worked with an energy healer who has pointed out to me a couple of things about age 7. Number one, that that tends to be when our subconscious solidifies, right? Like we change from receiving everything directly to the subconscious to like, okay, that sort of part of our like being a total sponge is done, and now we're going to receive information in our conscious brains. And I started gymnastics at that time. I don't remember if it was 1984 or 1980. I don't know what year it was, but not long after I started gymnastics, it was the 84 Olympics, where I was certain that I was going to be the next Mary Lou Retton. But hey, Brady, close the door, please. Okay, sorry. But that is also when I recognized that I stopped having fun. I got very serious, like, okay, I'm going to commit to this thing. I'm going to learn how to be perfect. I'm going to do all the things. And I was not the most talented gymnast, but when you're 7 and you're the most dedicated and you're the most consistent and you're the most focused, you tend to be the best. So what happened is when I started in gymnastics, maybe I couldn't do all the flips and stuff, but when we would compete, I would get the best scores because precision was my thing. Okay, so then what happened with gymnastics is as I got older, my friends who maybe didn't have the capacity when they were 7 to like focus and point their toes, well, by the time they were 13 or 14, they had gained that ability, and they were tiny with a low center of gravity and were able to like flip around in the way that my like long limbs couldn't do. And so it was an interesting lesson for me around understanding that in that particular sport, it didn't really matter how hard I worked, that there was a ceiling, right? I remember I quit gymnastics when I was 14, and I remember trying to do giant swings on the bars, like when you go and the way the bars were set at the gym, I couldn't do them without scraping my toes on the floor. Mm-hmm. And same thing, there was a part of my balance beam routine included 2 back handsprings on the beam, and I could barely get them to fit. And so it was like a frustration with my physical body and recognizing, and I don't know, maybe I could have figured it out, but it was more like recognizing my physical limitations and deciding what to do about that. No amount of discipline, no amount of push-ups or sit-up like it could change the fact that I was already like 5'6". So that was like my first sort of coming to grips with that. But what I did with it is I had a moment. So now I'm graduating 8th grade. I'm going into high school, and I'm like, okay, I'm not going to do gymnastics anymore. What's my thing going to be? And this is hilarious when I think about it, because I was in this moment of deciding, do I become like a professional bodybuilder or a distance runner? Which, when you think of those two things, like they couldn't be further from each other.
Yeah.
But that's where I was. And I'm like, I think I'm going to try running. And so running, I was more physically adept at running. I was prepared for running because I had this mentality of excellence, right? This idea that you show up and you work hard and you do everything and you can achieve, right? I got that from gymnastics, and it didn't like necessarily pan out. So, but I took it into running. And by the way, now as someone who coaches young runners, maybe I'm biased, but I love it when I get former gymnasts, because they're strong, they're flexible, and they're disciplined already. So I'm like, sweet, which leads into discipline, right? So as a runner, I am extremely disciplined. And I ran all through high school and all through college and did all the things, right? Have that value of excellence, and you show up and you work your hardest every day and you do all the things. And it definitely carried me to levels of success. But I didn't learn to listen to myself until I was done with training competitively, right? So I competed my 4 years in high school. I competed my 5 years in college. and I was good. I mean, I was a Division I collegiate athlete, but within that context, I was not like great, right? I there was definitely still room to grow into myself. And what I recognize now is what would have served me really well was being able to couple my like rigid discipline, which I am very good at rigid discipline, making myself do things I don't want to do because of the long term vision, right? The long term goal. If I could have better coupled that with the ability to listen to my intuition, to listen to my inner wisdom, to know that the world's not going to end if I take today off, or the world's not going to end if I listen to my tired body and slow the pace a little bit. And I didn't like, I just, that was not even in my frame of what needs to happen as a collegiate athlete. It wasn't what my coaches were telling me, although I think they would have had I told them, like, hey, I'm really tired, or um, you know, if I had asked, do you think it's okay if I adjust the workout this way? Or I'm sure that they would have been like, yes, Carrie, listen to your body. But that just wasn't something that was like preached or talked about at the time. And so post collegiately, I began coaching athletes. As you're like guiding other people, right? It's somehow easier to stray from, at least for me, it was way easier to stray from whatever was on the piece of paper and trust myself in terms of what these people needed and make adjustments based on, oh, they look a little tired today, or I'm getting the sense that today it's smarter for us to actually have a talk and a short run, as opposed to, like, it was so much easier for me to trust my intuition. And then as I stopped, training for this, the race, right? But just training to be someone who's fit enough to run with these high school kids, I had more grace with myself. I allowed rest days to be truly restful. I trusted myself enough to go, if I don't feel like running today, it's okay. I'm probably going to feel like running tomorrow. And what happened is, um, I reached new like levels of fitness that I never had when I was being so rigidly disciplined. Now, the caveat to that is that, like, developmentally, women distance runners hit their peak at age 32. So I was also getting faster because I was getting older and I was still running. But having said that, I was training so much less, or training differently, and getting the same or better results than I was when I was training so hard in college. So I don't know if that's answered your question around discipline, but I think that I'm learning how to marry discipline and trusting myself and remembering that my higher self knows. So on days that I go, oh God, I don't really want to do this, it's usually not that I don't really want to do this. It's just that I'm dreading some aspect of it. Like, I actually really do want to do it. I really do want to climb that mountain or run those 12 miles or whatever, because I know I don't ever want to run 12 miles actually, but like, but I know how it feels to have done it. And so lots of times it's just resistance, or it's momentum around the starting. Like today, I haven't done my run yet. I haven't done my workout yet. So I'm currently wearing my sports bra and my running top because I know that if I don't at least get dressed for running, the momentum of sitting on my butt is going to keep me here. So my discipline is putting on my sports bra, getting my running clothes on, and knowing that I actually do want to do this today. I really do. I do want to do it, but I've just got some momentum around not doing it. So I don't know. I'm talking forever now. What do you got?
For me, the warm up is the hardest part. Like, I am a sucky warmer upper. Like, the first, incline up a mountain, or if I'm running, like the first 100 yards or so is like absolutely the worst. My blood is like starting to move around my body, and I'm like achy or whatever, or tired, or breathing hard. Like, but I always tell myself, like, 5 minutes, like, just do 5 minutes and you'll feel awesome. And I think that's always it. It's not that we don't want to do it, it's that there's one part of it that's not appealing to our momentum brain, and if we just get past that, then we'll really know. I mean, of course, I've had times when I really know, no, today's not the day, or I mean, I've been on hikes and in the middle of it been like, oh, nope, time to turn around and go home. And I don't know why, but I always listen to myself. So I just thought it was interesting because a lot of what we do, business, sports, hobbies, relationships, we'll find ourselves at an impasse, maybe once and it's a huge one, or maybe there are little ones along the way. Um, and to keep going often takes that reframe or okay, just 5 minutes. All right, I can do it. It's okay. I can get past it. And so I think it's a really good skill to have to be able to discern what's really going on here. If I push through, I'm not going against my higher self's path of least resistance. I'm just moving past some little, burr. I don't know what I mean?
Well, it's interesting that you say that because I think even on those days, right? The days where you like have to bargain with yourself, like the days where you're like, okay, Rachel, let's just give it 5 minutes, right? Sometimes I get to the end of those 5 minutes and I'm still like, oh God, I really just still don't want to be doing this. But I know that it's probably good for me and blah, blah, blah. So I have the conversation with myself again. Okay, 5 more minutes. Okay. And there have been times now that where my younger self just would have like powered through. Where after the next 5 minutes, I'm still not into it. Or sometimes this happens to me a lot now. Like I'll be on a run and I think I'm feeling good and my brain gets going and I'll either find myself running way too hard and recognize like, whoa, I gotta slow down. Or lately what's been happening is I'll suddenly notice that I've stopped. Like it's like, what just happened? I thought I was running and now I'm stopped. That's the inner wisdom that we're talking about. And instead of like judging myself now, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I totally stopped running and I'll walk for a few minutes or a few seconds and then get going again. And sometimes on those days the days where I feel like I have to keep making bargains with myself, and the real desire is to stop, then I'll stop. Right. But oftentimes you start making bargains with yourself and then you get into it and you're like, okay, now I'm going to run to that next stoplight or now I'm going to keep going until I get to that ridge or whatever. And I think that's what you're talking about, right? Is the discerning, just what we always talk about, Rachel, like listening to the yes, no. And, but yeah, striking a balance between discipline and intuition. I mean, I think discipline is somewhat intuitive for me in the sense
Hmm.
that I know how to, like, creating discipline in my life, so easy. Like creating, I mean, that maybe for everyone it's not so easy, but for me, like creating, okay, I'm going to say this out loud and then realize I'm contradicting myself. Because one of the things I say that I need help with is like creating structures, but that's all around like business crap. But creating structures for like personal habits, man, I'm amazing at
Yes, you
that.
are.
So those is that intuitive to me, or do I just have so much practice because I've been doing it since I was 7?
I think it's just part of you now, and it seems to work for you.
Well, so I want to go back to you and excellence and discipline because now I'm curious about you in these things. You are not someone who I would describe as disciplined. You are someone who I would describe as uh, spontaneous. You're someone who I would describe as, I want to say, who values whimsy. And yet, but as someone who works with you, like you're pretty awesome about being disciplined, about doing what I would say, like about doing what you say you're going to do. And when you create something, I think that you create with excellence, right? You create to the highest standards that you're capable of. So I think what I'm asking you is like, how do you view yourself around discipline? I'll start there.
I value doing a good job because that's where I get to feel myself. You know what I mean? I like being present with something. I like doing it to the best of my ability because why bother doing it if I'm not going to do that? Like to me, it doesn't make sense. I mean, sure, I probably half-ass stuff all the time, honestly, like journal practice and I don't know. I mean, I had a morning show and I did it like 37 times and then I took a break. Like there's things that I drop off from, but when I'm doing it, I try to do my best because that's the most enjoyable thing for me. I like that. But at the same time, I'm not a perfectionist by any stretch of the imagination. If my best is done, then I'll know it and then I'll feel happy enough to move on to something else. I think my biggest discipline is living in integrity with myself, like my inner being, my intuition. I'm so dedicated. That's the only thing I'm like truly committed to and dedicated to is living my truth. So if if someone's talking about something and I'm really not into it, I will probably politely excuse myself or I've made huge life decisions based on that. And that started when I was really little. Like, I almost didn't graduate second grade because I hated school for really reasonable reasons that like adults didn't seem to care about. And, like I've been this way my whole life. So, kind of like you, second grade is probably around, I think they're 8 or something. But yeah, that's where discipline comes in for me. And that's just because I've seen what happens when I'm not true to myself, big or small. Like it doesn't work for anybody. Nobody wins when I'm compromising myself.
Yep, that's where I see your discipline as well. Like you are so disciplined in, and that translates into all different areas, right? And so I think that is an area where I am getting better, right? Like I am,
Yeah.
because it's important to me. And so finding that has been such a shift. So remember, I was just saying I'm good at creating structures around practices and stuff, but you just nailed it. Like that is the thing that you have helped me with, and the thing that I am now, I think I care about being the most disciplined about is exactly what you're talking about, is remembering like feeling good is a discipline. And I think that is paradoxical because people think, oh, sure, you could just feel good all the time and do whatever you want, and like, but like feeling good, training yourself to feel good on all the time takes discipline.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I appreciate that connection, because yeah.
Yeah, I know. We were in our BFF meeting a couple months ago, and one of the members asked me that, like, how do you manage to feel like this? She probably said all the time. Of course, I'm not like that all the time, but most of the time. And that's it. It's a choice. It's just a choice. And I know what happens when I follow through with that choice, and I know what happens when I don't. And I don't beat myself up for anything, like if I'm not. But yeah, it serves me really well.
But even not beating yourself up. So this is what I find is like retraining my brain. I think that's the way I want to say it. Retraining my brain is has taken years of discipline, right?
Hmm.
The same way that, my being able to creating the same muscle memory in my legs that gets them like turning over quickly. It's taken the same amount of training and discipline. And don't get me wrong, like running fast requires all sorts of mental discipline, but paying attention to what's going on with my thoughts and with my body's reactions to things, and making conscious choices about them, like you're saying, that requires discipline. And in the beginning, it feels maybe like an insurmountable amount of discipline. Like, oh, do I just have to constantly pay attention to what I think all day long? Like, I can't do that all day, like,
Yeah.
and just like anything though, just like we were talking about, like getting the discipline, once you start creating habits,
Hmm.
then it doesn't require what I consider to be discipline. I don't know. Discipline has the connotation of like doing something that you don't want to do because you know you should.
Right.
And that's not what I'm talking about. I don't think it's what you're talking about either, right? It's just
Yeah, I
that
think
now.
we're kind of changing that from like doing what you don't want to do because you should to doing what you temporarily don't want to do because there's a real desire.
Yeah. And then you create momentum. So
Mhm.
where you used to, I'm talking about your thoughts, or I'm thinking about anybody who's ever gone on a diet. Like, the first couple of days you have willpower, and then the next couple of days requires discipline and commitment to like what you talked about. And then after that, you kind of get a rhythm, right? You get going, or with our physical training or whatever else. Like, there's a certain amount of wading through resistance that requires discipline. And then after that, you get the muscle memory, you get the flow, and there's still discipline involved, right? There's still the negotiation with yourself, probably, that we have to just go 5 more minutes, just go 5 more minutes. But the momentum makes the shift. And you and I were on a separate conversation the other day, but whatever conversation we were in was helping me recognize all of the shifts that have happened in my whole life since I put more of a focus on, or since I applied my incredible gift of discipline to changing my vibration and choosing what I want to look at and choosing what I want to think. Yeah, huge difference. And it requires less discipline today for sure than it required years ago.
I love it.
Me too.
So I have a weird question. You're, one of my more normal friends. And
Yes.
I know like a couple years ago, especially, we weren't having this particular conversation as much. So when I told you and, our BFF group, like, hey, I'm an alien, I'm a group being, what was your initial reaction? Because I remember the first time we spoke, like when you reached out to me and we had our first conversation, were you a little scared that I was psychic or like worried or something? There's something about that.
Yeah. So I was intrigued by people who were psychic because I wanted to be psychic, right? Spoiler, we're all psychic, but
Yeah.
um, but I definitely was like intrigued by that, and it terrified me. And I remember I interviewed you one time, and I was like, "Dude, are you like reading my mind? Can you see?" Like, it terrified me because I didn't. I was probably doing a pretty good job of putting up a facade, and I had built it like, and it was scary to me that there were people who could see through that, right? Like I imagined that I would be talking to you and you would be sensing or knowing like what was really going on inside of me. And so more, it was like a insecurity thing. It freaked me the F out. When you said you were a group being, I was more curious. I I don't think it phased me at all. Like, and then when you started doing Intimate Alien, she still freaks me out a little bit. Same thing, same feeling I had about you being psychic is like, now she freaks me out a little bit because it's that same push pull, right? Like, I want to like lean in and know this person, and can she see through? Like, there's stuff that I feel like she can see or know about me, and do I want to know that? Am I ready? Like, it's that same. I have a little bit of resistance around like Intimate Alien stuff, which you'll probably notice. Like, anytime there's like an opportunity to hang out with her, I'm like, I don't know. Like, maybe. And whenever I do, but that is an interesting thing too, because whenever I do, I'm like, okay, I'm glad. And now, of course, when you and I are talking, I'll hear her pop in. I'll see her like when Intimate Alien starts to show up more strongly. I'm like, oh yeah, that was her. Once I knew you, here's the thing: you're really normal for a freak.
Hmm.
I don't know.
I'm an
I don't
incredibly boring freak.
know. I know a lot of like, now it's so interesting because like my friends in the real world, right, they tend to be like people who I went to high school or college with, and they are becoming more like open and aware. But in that group, like, I'm the freak, I'm the weirdo, I'm the one that is like sort of on the edge. And then in my online friend group, right? Like I am kind of the I am like the boring. I'm the normal one in the group. So I don't know what that says, but no, you freaked me out mostly because I was insecure, right? Like I felt like you could see through me. So when you were describing being a group being, that didn't affect me, except for I was like, that's weird and cool and whatever, Rachel. And probably because you, when you announced it, either we were a safe place to be, or you felt safe enough in it, you felt secure enough in it that it didn't like, I think if you had been like, I don't know, like, but the way I remember you talking about it is like, I understand now. It has been revealed to me. And because at least I had at least one other friend who had like a major life shift where like one day she was normal, and the next day, and turns out she wasn't. She was totally psychic her whole life. But one day she felt like she was a normal person, and the next day she could see into people's realities in a very different way. So I already had experience with like knowing people who had downloads or like that it no, that one didn't phase me. I don't know. I'm sure it phased you more. Like
Yeah, it's interesting. When that happened, I felt like was having this huge identity crisis. For a whole week, I felt like foggy and I didn't know really what was happening, but I knew it was really big. And then it settled in and I understood it. And, I was that all along. It was just kind of like I had made room to know myself as that, I think what happened. And I realized my experience of being a human is really different from most people. But I wonder, like, for you, have there been times in your life where you felt like you were questioning your identity? Like, who am I? What am I? Is there anything like a rite of passage or anything that had you feeling like that?
yes, several times in my life I have had that. So one was, I think it was pretty scary choosing a college, getting to what is like the pinnacle, the biggest life choice, right? Feeling like I had done everything right. I was a straight A student. I was a star athlete. I was like getting to the big decision point, and way before that, by the way, I already felt like a fraud, right? Like total imposter syndrome because um, school was really easy. And so I was getting these great grades, these excellent grades, without having to show up in excellence, right? Like I could not read the book and write a great paper and get an A. And I could, like, there was that going on. So identity crisis number one was just around the recognition that, like, oh crap, I have faked my way to this point, and now my whole future depends on like making the right choice. Like that was scary, and there was definitely like a who am I? What do I want? I've just faked my way here, and I'm like this fast runner, but I don't know what I want to do or what I want to be or where I want to go. And I don't think I handled that very well. I followed the scholarship. I think the one thing I knew was that I wanted to keep running, that I wanted to do that well. So that was identity crisis number one. There was definitely one, probably my husband and I dated in college and then broke up. And then I dated this other guy, and he was so good to me, but he wasn't the right one. But I wanted him to be because he was so good to me. And at the time, my husband was less, he was my husband, obviously, yes, but he was less good to me. Um, so I definitely had that, like trying to figure out who am I, what do I want, and I think at least at that point in my life, in my early 20s, I just, am I right? There's this push pull around being desirable. Like, is anybody going to like me? Right. So I wasn't quite yet in like, do I like myself? Yesterday, I watched a whole season. This is so terrible. It's not terrible. It's wonderful. It's for high school kids, but it's not really high school appropriate. It starts out with a suicide. 13 Reasons Why. I'm on season 3, and it just came out, and I watched the whole freaking season in a day because I have this thing on my computer where I can speed up. So I'm watching it in like one and a half, almost 2 times as fast, just so I can get it in like a short amount of time, which caused like the stress, the high school stress, like all of it. And of course, there's murders and angst and all that. But I remember, this is what I'm getting at, and maybe you've had this too, moments in my life where I wouldn't necessarily call them identity crises, but they probably were, where the weight of the situation that I was in felt unbearable, felt like I just wanted to sit on the floor and cry, that I like, and whatever story I'm telling myself is just awful. I'm reminded of the bathroom scene in Eat, Pray, Love at the beginning, where she's like literally on her bathroom floor crying. And then you have this moment of calm, right? This moment of like clarity, this moment of like, not necessarily I have my whole life figured out, but like what is happening right now isn't true, isn't real, isn't me. So who do I want to be now? I've had those moments a lot. Was that what it was like? Like feeling before you recognized I'm a group being? Were you having that, like, you said it was like foggy and like you were feeling off. Did it feel like uncomfortable in your own skin? Because that's what I feel like. It feels like, I don't want to call it like a psychotic break, but right, where you just recognize like you're in the wrong story. And so there's like a moment of clarity where you can like jump jump to something else.
Yeah, well, I've definitely had that. Like when I was in the years that I was thinking about leaving my ex-husband, that's all it was. It was like one big cry on the floor. It was pretty terrible having that question of, am I a good person if I leave? Can I still be a good person, right? Like I wasn't even religious, but that idea of, Catholic guilt really, for some reason, came up for me. My father's religious, so maybe I was feeling that, but no, this other thing was more like I really honestly didn't know who I was. Like I didn't know who I was. I couldn't answer that. It was very hard to describe. And I actually reached out to a stranger, which I don't ever do. You know me, I'm I'm pretty much in my own little box here. But yeah, it was
Wait,
I
tell me
had
more. You reach out to?
someone I don't speak with anymore, but someone who described themselves as a walk-in. Do you know what that is?
Mm-mm. It sounds like a body
So,
snatcher.
well, yeah, basically, but it's all, permission based. So basically, one soul, we could say, is living in the body for a certain number of years, and then a different soul will come in. And so that new soul doesn't feel a sense of familiarity with old friends or family. They just feel like those are completely different people. They're not related to me. Maybe they have a different skill set and they're not, they can't perform a job the way they used to, etc. So it takes a big shift and a lot of calibrating and decision making. And I helped her through that a lot. She initially thought I was a walk-in. I knew I wasn't. I knew that's not what was going on. But anyway, yeah, it was weird.
Okay, so what you're describing about not knowing who you are. So holy crap, I'm super fascinated by this idea of a walk-in, and I am understanding that in several ways. One, because sometimes I know this isn't the same thing, but like sometimes I'll remember something from my childhood, but can't actually remember it because I'm no longer connected to who she was, like if that makes sense. And so I can
Yeah.
see that idea of a walk-in, like so interesting though, like in terms of souls, and like that one soul would choose to be inside Rachel until age 12 and then setting, like that is fascinating to me. But what you're talking about, like saying not knowing who you are, I'm actually associating with people who like go through like Alzheimer's or traumatic brain injury or like something like that, where they're like, know they're supposed to know, but don't
Hmm.
know. Is that how you felt?
Yeah. I mean, to the best of my knowledge, I felt calm, but very confused. And instead of having a sense of being in my body, I had a sense that I was also very much here. Like all of me, it's so hard to describe because I'm not all in my body, but there was the same stuff that's supposed to be in my body out of my body. And it was like this big fog that was like trying to like stuff itself in. And all I was living in for a week was the fog.
So I want to understand this, and like I'm hoping people are watching want to understand this because I had been in a fog.
Hmm.
But when I'm in a fog, I always describe the fog. I can like feel the fog. It's like I know there's clarity out there, but the fog is like a barrier
Hmm.
between me and what I'm like. Even like I sometimes I can describe the fog as like it would be like if you're trying to look at something, but your lens is fogged, and it doesn't matter. Your periphery isn't fogged, but like no matter where you look, you need to clean the lens in front of you. Like that, I understand. But what you're talking about is like not that the fog is a barrier or something that, but like that you are the fog. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I am the fog. And it did occur to me like maybe I'm losing my mind. Like maybe I'm like spilling out of myself or maybe maybe something's gone really wrong. But I also knew like that really wasn't happening. I knew it would be okay.
so you've described that several times to me and on videos that I've seen about how it was like the beings that are you went from being on the shelf,
Hmm.
which I always imagine like, remember Indian in the Cupboard or like Toy Story where like the little creatures, like I would imagine you had this shelf with like your little beings that like advised you. And you said, well, it's like they were out on the shelf and then suddenly they they just like jumped in, like they were inside of me.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't get that. So what I do get it in the sense that in my like if I'm making the movie of your life, Rachel, her whole childhood, she when she's alone and by herself, she goes into her room and she looks up at the shelf and there's her little beings that she can talk to get advice and then one day when she's old enough, um, they one by one jump off the shelf and into her head, right? So that seems easy enough. So where are these beings? Are they the fog, or they all like if I'm imagining like Willy Wonka when they, when they teleport, how they turn into like little stuff and then they go. You know what I'm talking about?
I know. Are you talking about the new Willy Wonka?
No, the old one. Are you too young? Have you not seen the old one?
Oh no, that's my favorite movie of all time. I've never
Okay,
seen
so
the
you
new
know
one. Oh, you're talking about the chocolate bar.
the
How he
chocolate bar and he does it with a person, right? Where they're
right.
like, where'd they go? And they're like up
Yeah.
there. Is
Yeah,
that what happened?
I would say that's accurate. Yeah, like there's a term called dissension of spirit that that lady told me about, and I had never heard that before. It's kind of like when you give yourself more capacity to hold your own non-physical energy. I'm pretty sure that's what was happening. So I had reached through my discipline a bigger capacity to hold more energy here on Earth. And so then they all moved in and they were already there. I mean, that's what I am. Like I am that group, but yes, instead of referencing them outside of me, they moved in a bigger way and I integrated pretty quickly after that. But it was just a weird experience. I mean, it's like if you could imagine like you have ingredients for a smoothie that are sitting on your counter and then you put those ingredients in the blender and you blend them up. It's going to feel different. That's like what it was like.
That is actually really helpful because honestly, the way that I imagine you being a group being is a little bit. Remember the Power Rangers, how they were all like separate things and then they could combine to be the one thing?
Yeah.
Or like Transformers, how they were each their own car that transformed, but then they could combine to be like the monster transformer, and like one's the arm and the other's the leg and the other one's the head. Like I have imagined you being a group being that way, not a smoothie. I've imagined you being a salad instead of a smoothie. So it's actually like that makes a lot of sense to me. I get when you said I integrated, I never really got it, but like wonder if anybody's still watching this. But it's like I'm hearing that, yeah, like you baked into something that is made of those things, but you can still, this is the thing I think is fascinating, like intimate alien,
Mhm.
you can still pull her out and she can be fully her, which is different than like I can taste the banana in this smoothie. That makes sense?
Yeah, it's not a perfect analogy, but yes, I can isolate what I am and be that more fully, like with Intimate Alien or my Zetas or my, angel selves. I haven't quite, there's parts of me that I haven't totally figured out yet. Like there's little blue, these little blue things that I don't really know much about, but they show up for me all the time. Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. I hadn't really thought about that in a while. It's like, do you know what your kidneys look like and where they are in your body? It's like I don't have to know everything, but it's there for me if I want to.
Okay, this is super fascinating. This has really taken a turn from excellence to like, am I crazy? No, I'm a group being. Oh, and I have to ask you something else because I still forget that you can see things that I can't see,
Mhm.
right? That like looking through your eyes. And I remember I was fascinated by that for the longest time. There's someone in the room with me. Like, what's, like, what does she see behind me? Can she see my thought bubbles? Like, so I think what I want to know is what are your group? You got your little blue things. You got intimate alien. Is she different than Zetas? Is she like what's in there, Rachel?
So, Intimate Alien is a non physical Pleiadian being, and she's like somewhat singular being. I have a group of angels, normally four or five, and if you want to get specific, they often align to like the Raphael type energy, and the the Zetas are non physical but can be physical, and they're like,
Gray.
yeah, grayish green. They're probably the closest thing I have to like family. Their whole evolution has kind of coincided with my lifetime in being able to feel emotion. And so when I was really little, I was really, really, really afraid of them. And then by the time I was in my like mid to late 20s is kind of when we met each other on different terms, and it was really cool. So like my heart gets really big when I think about them. And because they're like your like weird Greek family that you never really see, but when you see them, it's so cool. Yeah, the other little blue things, I mean, I've like visited them astrally, but I don't exactly know what they're called or now I'm getting a runny nose. Yeah, so I don't know that much, but that as far as I know, that's about it.
What I think is interesting is you had a day not too long ago where you felt really weird,
Mhm.
right? Or you were like, I'm not sure what's going on, but
It
something's
was a
weird.
week ago.
Okay, so do you know what that was yet?
Yeah, I think it was just another little dissension of spirit, for lack of a better word, because it was the same feeling, and but it only lasted a day, but it was very strong. Again, fog. I was sitting on my front porch because I decided that I should take a walk. My neighbor was walking down the street. I mean, I see him every day. I didn't even recognize him. He was like, "Hello," and I was like, "Oh." I mean, it just takes over. So luckily it only lasted a day. It did feel really similar after. I actually had a client that day, and I was really upfront about him. I was like, I woke up feeling like I am on laughing gas, like I can't really function right now. So but he was okay with it, and I knew enough that I could get through a session well. So yeah, but I wasn't in any shape to interview someone, which is what we had planned on doing. So yeah, it
Okay.
was weird. It doesn't happen often, but when it does, it just takes over.
So you just said it was a mini dissension of spirit. And then today you're saying the little blue things. I don't know what they are, but they're, and then as you were talking about them, like you got the runny nose, which means
Yeah.
that, like, so I'm just projecting that perhaps it's those little blue guys, right? They come in. So I'm now super duper excited because I'm totally invested in this, because I feel like intimate alien is the part of you that like I know well. I can recognize when she shows up. And you've talked about the Zetas before. Those are like the long fingered, like,
Yeah.
um, so like
The
when
ones
you
that
think
human
about,
are afraid of, basically.
yeah, like when you think about aliens, which I love that. Like I love, so I feel just you explaining that helps me feel like peaceful, even about the people who have, say they've been abducted and probed and all of that. Like I can now think about that differently. Like,
Mhm.
oh, they were visiting Rachel too, right? They were, she was afraid of them, but really they're, so that I can get down with. The 4 to 5 angels with the Raphael energy, I don't know enough about that, but I'm interested. But the blue things, now I am like, ooh, I am dying to know, right? When we recognize them and get to know them, and it feels like a video game. Sorry that I'm comparing you to like movies and video games, but it feels
Okay.
like, and I don't even play video games, but it feels like unlocking the next level, right? Like where you get to know, those creatures show up and then they help you in this way. That's what it feels like. So I'm
That's what
just
it
gonna
feels like to
assume.
me too. And it always seems to coincide with making a real world decision. Like, how do I have more capacity to know this stuff? It's because I do allow so much of my truth to come through. And that's how I make room for it. Like, that's how everybody can do it, right? Like, you experience more intuition and more ease and comfort in your life when you give that to yourself on this plane, right? And then more can come in.
So this is gonna seem like really a skeptical question or something that's not. I don't know, is it philosophical? Here's what it is. I mean, what if you're just this crazy girl with this overactive imagination that is making this all up?
I actually love that question. I've asked myself that so many times because I didn't know anyone else like this growing up. I just saw what I saw. Like, I had visits from family members when they'd pass away, and they'd tell me things I'd never heard of before. I saw angels when I was really little, and they freaked me out because I didn't know what that was. Like, the first time I saw aliens in front of me, I was fucking terrified. Like, what is this? Oh my God. I am just as baffled by it, honestly. And when I ask myself that, like, well, what is this? Is it real? Am I making it up? To me, it doesn't matter. It enhances my life. And, maybe for the 2 weeks out of my entire life that it's kind of brought me down, like when I couldn't really do anything else, who cares about that? I feel good about it. It enhances my life, makes me a happier person. It's enjoyable, it's interesting, it's fun. And so that's the only thing that matters to me. When I was in high school and it was unmanageable and hard and scary, I would probably have said something else. But at the same time, my therapist, I got help for it. My therapists were giving me medicine. I tried to take it, it didn't feel good. I had this huge feeling in me that it was okay for me to be sad right now. And so I went with that. Like, I've always trusted my inner knowing, and that's gotten me through. And when I learned that all I need to do to not be susceptible to that negative stuff is to be happy, to raise my vibration, I felt like, okay, well, now I know everything I need to know to keep myself in a better place. And so, yeah, the answer is I could be. Who knows? I don't know, but it feels good. And so I'm going with it.
So it's just reminding me, like, I feel like one of the things that I still talk to runners about is like anybody who's not a freshman, my job is to teach them how to race like when they were freshmen, right? When they didn't know any better. They didn't know. And I think about our journey as humans, and so much of it is about getting to the place where we can respond to life the way that we did when we were children. right? Before we knew any better, when we knew only ourselves. So I like that because I like that when you're kids, you live in your imagination. There's no line between what's real and what's imaginary. It's only people around you who start to like start to tell you what's real and what's imaginary. And so it sounds like, I think the most important thing is this is not me suggesting that you're living in an imaginary world. It is me saying, there's not actually any difference between like what is real, what we call imaginary as closed-minded adults is actually real. And your example of that was, talking to dead relatives, and you knew things that you couldn't possibly have known. I have another friend who she's as a very small child, she was like a human lie detector. Like it was very obvious to her, not to the other adults around her, but she could clearly see who was being deceitful. And she described it as like being able to see the face behind their face. And I think about, there's a whole TV show on young children who remember their past lives. Like somehow the barrier between the lives is not like solid, and they remember who they used to be. And that happened to, not to me particularly, but I saw a psychic before I had my third child. And she, by the way, told me I was going to have a third child. I was like, whatever, lady, you're crazy. She told me several things, but one of them was that my oldest daughter, she was the mother and I was the child. And that freaked me out because my daughter, who at the time was like 4, used to say that all the time. Remember when I was the mommy and you were the child? And I just thought that was a weird thing that little kids say. And so that I find interesting, right? Like that is imagination.
I know. And that's what happens. I was a psychic for many, many years as my job. And, I saw hundreds of people, and there were just things that would come to me that I couldn't possibly have made up, and that absolutely were too specifically weird to be, like a coincidence. I remember my friend used to have these parties where I'd come over and do readings for everyone. And I met her working as an admin. She'd only been like a secretary admin. And this one time I told her, "You're going to have a colorful paper company." And I didn't even know what that meant. That was just what was coming up. And she's like, "Yeah, that's not going to happen. No way in hell am I having a colorful paper company." And she said it lovingly, because we were cool. But then a year later, someone that she knew from like South Carolina asked her to start a scrapbooking company with him. And what did they sell? Colorful paper and all kinds of shapes of colorful paper and patterns. And it was like, but that's just one example of hundreds that I could give you, in medium readings. Like this little boy's walking down a driveway and he's showing me a picture frame, and the woman sitting in front of me who hasn't said a word yet is like, "Oh my God, that's my son," and he moves the picture frame on me every week. And it's like, I've never seen a little boy before comes through. That was my first child to come in a medium reading. And so I became okay with it. It's I don't care if it's real or not, but at the same time, there isn't a doubt in me either. I think that's why a lot of people tell me I sound very matter of fact when I talk about this kind of stuff, because it's just my life experience. Like you would say the same thing to me in the same tone about running a race.
Okay, so 2 things. Number 1, yes. And I get that now for people and feel more confidence. I used to be like, I'm not sure what this is about or why, but like as you're talking about this is what's coming to mind. And then they'd be like, oh my God, they would give me validation, which would help. And I don't like call myself a psychic, right? I call myself highly intuitive, but as more validation comes, like I used to be afraid to say that stuff. Like when you're talking about this, what I'm hearing is that, and they'd be like, yes, that gives validation. So that's number 1. I get you on that. Number 2, now you've got to tell me something, Rachel. Like, like I'm like sitting here like, okay, friend, which we talk all the time. So now I want to know, like, when we're talking, are you like seeing stuff, for instance, right now, as we're talking, is stuff coming up for you and you're able to like focus on my words and not see other things around me? Like, that's the part I'm still curious about. Or if I say, Rachel, give me a reading, like, what does that mean?
Well, normally I'm not just like fully on. There's a lot of extra stimuli that I would have to parse through if I had all that on while I was actually talking to someone. And so, no, I don't just read people while I'm talking to them. Sometimes things do come up, though, of course, and sometimes I'll see things in their room. And so it's not like completely off or completely on. But if
Would
you,
you say something like, or do you just, you see something and be like, I'm not going to say that? Like,
it depends on who it is. If it happened with you, well, normally what happens is I'll just hear something like you're saying, like, "Oh, do you mean this?" or "What about this?" And I just weave it in. But if you ask me, like, give me a reading or tell me something or what's in my room or what does my aura look like, then yeah, I can tell you because then it'll instantly like come on.
okay, so now I want to know. So I'm going to put you on the spot, right? Imagine that I'm someone at this like group reading. Um, how does that work? And I know you don't even do this anymore, but now we're having fun. So,
I mean, I don't do it anymore, but it's still part of me, like I could ask you to run down the street as fast as you could. Same
I
thing.
do it for you later.
Yeah. So if we were sitting together like at a party, I would just get quiet for a moment and like tune into your energy. And it's funny, I'm wanting to take off my glasses. And oh, I remember I always did that. I always took off my glasses. Isn't that interesting? And bringing me back.
All right.
I would say, it's funny. It's never what I want it to be. What's coming up for me is your husband. And I think you wanting him to be as on board with your vision as you are. And that little bit of him not looking in your direction is bothering you. He's got his own stuff going on. He's looking this way. You're really wanting him to be as excited as you about what you want to do. And you're also a little worried about how your oldest child is going to feel about what you want to do. It's coming up that you don't want to be an intrusion in her life, and you're a little bit worried about that. Oh, but you also know she has other goals. So you're not even sure if this one thing that you want to work on is even what she's ultimately going to want to do. And that's okay with you, but you're wondering about that, about what her vision is as she's getting older, and it is so multi-talented. Um, and as for you, what what you're wanting to accomplish in your life and how I'm seeing it right now, it just feels like a very big ball of light. Like you and all the little things that you're doing, your business and the hobbies and the show and whatever else is in there. I'm seeing it now as one big ball of light. Like everything is intertwined and connected, and nothing is necessarily differentiated. And so it's weird because you do have such specific things that you're thinking about and goals that you're creating. Goals isn't even really the right word. You're putting things in buckets, let's just say. But when it really comes down to it, everything is one big ball of light. And you can tap into that light. Maybe that's even what we'd call your vortex. But everything is there and it's together. And maybe this is the advice is you don't have to worry about what path you're taking at any certain time. You're never excluding anything else. You can walk on a very specific path to one of those buckets and you're on a path to every bucket. I think that's what's wanting to come through because you sometimes are worried about what to focus on. and where to spend your energy, and you don't have to.
Okay, my
So
friend.
there's a
So
little reading for you.
yeah, holy crap. This is so fun because this isn't actually any different than a regular conversation that I would have with you, but I'm experiencing it differently because now it's under the category of psychic reading, right? Does that like, it's so
Yeah.
interesting. Like you and I have had, so you talked about my husband and like where I am with that, and like 100% that could have easily, you and I could have had that conversation, but the way that I received it is like, ah, I see that that is where you are. And what I heard is like, so stop worrying about it. Like it's kind of a non-issue. And then with my oldest daughter, Quinn, I didn't understand what you were saying. I was like, okay, I will hear it, but I don't know what she's talking about. And then as you shifted to the ball of light thing, I was like, oh, I know what you're talking about. And the ball of light thing, and I wrote down, don't worry what the path is because you're never excluding anything else. This is actually a point of like excitement and frustration in that I'm super excited because I know and feel the truth of that, and the momentum, the discipline and all of that I've been doing over the past 10 years is like definitely leading me to the knowing of the truth of that, as opposed to the number of times I have heard that from psychic people or like highly open people over the past 10 years. That is the one consistent thing over and over and over again is like this ball of golden light, or this like everything you touch turns to gold, and like massive, like everybody says that, and it has felt the Brene Brown uses the term foreboding joy, but it's not quite foreboding joy, but it has filled me with excitement and sadness at the same time. I love that you're putting your glasses back on. Like in the past, it would fill me with like hope and sadness. Like it would fill me with, yes, 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 that's what I really want. And I know it can't be, I'm so far from it. Right. Like at the same time. And I think just the more I hear it, and especially you saying it in the context of here's your reading, um, it's just like it's helping me relax. And of course, we all know the more we are relaxed, the easier things come to me. And so it is just like intuitive art, right? It is an incredible amount of validation to hear all this stuff from you, especially the stuff you said about Quinn. I think it's helping me realize, oh, I didn't know that I was doing that much mental gymnastics. And I think I'm creating resistance to some of the things I want because of what's going on in there. So thanks, Rachel Archelaus. That was amazing.
You're welcome. It was interesting for me too. I mean, I haven't really done that specific thing in a long time. And like, even just remembering like having the impulse to remove my glasses and then remembering, oh my God, I always did that. Like, that's so cool for me. And I do see
Yeah.
things differently. Like when we're just talking and maybe you're asking me for advice, it's a different receiving mode. Like when I'm doing this, I get visuals and then I'm figuring out what the scene is by also receiving like emotions or feelings, and translating that. Whereas it's a little bit more streamlined when we're just talking or I'm coaching with someone.
So interesting.
Yeah, it is. It's cool. Thanks. Well, I know I've kept
Thank
you
you.
a long time.
I'm happy, but I am hungry. So
Awesome. Well, is there anything you want to close with? Anything you want people to know about you?
no, probably, but I don't know what it is right now. But there is something that I want to close with, and it's actually a suggestion to you, if you want it. But that all of this conversation has been wonderful. But you and I talk all the time. But this public reading thing, I don't know if anybody would be as game as me. But like that was so fun. That was so fun, and yeah, I like watching those. So if you ever get the compulsion to do reading via video, or like brave enough to ask people like who wants I'm going to post it. You never know what's going to come up. Yeah, that was amazing.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, it's really fun. I've done that on TV and I've done that on radio shows and I always love it. It's super fun. I should do more of it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
All right, Carrie. Well, thanks for being an incredible friend. Thanks for being on the show and we hope to see you again.
All right. Thanks, Rachel.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.